At 49, he began again. Chapter 1. The Email That Changed Everything. William was 49 years old when a single email quietly changed the direction of his life. It arrived on an ordinary weekday morning, at a time when nothing dramatic was supposed to happen. William was sitting at the small dining table of his house, tying the laces of his worn-out black shoes. The house was awake but silent. His wife was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, and his children were getting ready for school in the next room. This routine had been repeating for years, almost decades. Life at 49 was not exciting, but it was stable. And for William, stability meant survival. He checked his phone casually, not expecting anything important. At his age, important news rarely came through emails. But this one was different. The subject line read, "Urgent, examination requirement, suspension notice." William frowned. His fingers paused mid-air. He opened the email slowly, as if delaying it might change what was written inside. The words were formal, cold, and direct. He was informed that due to new regulations, all employees in his position were required to pass a qualifying examination. Failure to do so within the given time would result in suspension from duty. William read the email twice, then a third time. His heart began to beat faster. Suspension. That word echoed in his mind like a warning bell. At 49, suspension did not mean a short break. It meant uncertainty. It meant loss of income. It meant fear. William leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He had not given an exam in more than 25 years. William belonged to a generation that had moved on from classrooms long ago. His life had been built through experience, not exams. He had learned through long hours, through mistakes, through responsibility. Books had slowly been replaced by files, meetings, duties, and deadlines. His brain was trained for work, not for memorizing syllabi. Exams were for young people, people with sharp memories, flexible routines, and time. William had none of those. He had a job that demanded long hours. He had a family that depended on him. He had a body that tired easily and a mind that was already full of worries. And now, suddenly, he was expected to sit for an exam like a student again. How can they do this now? He whispered to himself. The kitchen noise stopped. His wife noticed his silence. "What happened?" she asked, concern in her voice. William handed her the phone without saying a word. She read the email carefully. When she finished, she didn't panic. She didn't cry. She simply looked at him and said softly, "You will have to prepare." Her calmness frightened him more than the email itself. "You don't understand," William said, his voice low. "I haven't studied in years. I don't even remember how to study." "But you have to try," she replied. "For us." Those two words, "for us," settled heavily on his chest. At work that day, the email was all anyone talked about. Men his age gathered in small groups, whispering anxiously. Some were angry. Some were confused. Some openly admitted fear. "This is unfair," one man said. "My memory is not what it used to be," said another. "I can't manage work and study both," someone else complained. Many of them decided to join coaching classes immediately. They signed up for offline institutes, weekend batches, crash courses. William listened quietly. He knew one thing clearly: he didn't have time for classes. His duty hours were fixed. His travel time was long. His evenings were already occupied with family responsibilities. Coaching classes required time he simply did not have. When someone asked him, "Which class are you joining?" he forced a smile and said, "I'll see." But inside, he felt trapped. That night, William couldn't sleep. He lay on his bed staring at the ceiling fan, watching it rotate slowly. Thoughts raced through his mind. Can I really do this? What if I fail? What if I fail? What if I lose my job? What kind of father would that make me? He imagined sitting in an exam hall, surrounded by younger candidates. He imagined blank pages, forgotten formulas, unanswered questions. The fear was not just of failure. It was of embarrassment, of being judged, of realizing that time had taken something away from him. At 49, the biggest fear is not that you cannot start, it is that you might start and discover you are no longer capable. The next morning, William made a quiet decision. If he couldn't go to classes, he would try online preparation. It wasn't a confident decision. It wasn't brave. It was simply the only option left. He asked colleagues for help. Some shared links. Some shared notes. Some encouraged him. Others doubted silently. At home, he downloaded materials. Videos. PDFs, syllabus outlines. The syllabus looked unfamiliar, almost frightening. So much, he whispered. For a moment, he wanted to close everything and pretend the email never arrived. But then he looked at a photograph on the wall, his family smiling during a festival, standing close together. That was when he told himself something important. I don't need to be perfect. I just need to start. The first week was chaos. William overthought everything. Should I study in the morning or night? What if I waste time? Am I studying the right topic? Some days, he studied after night duty, his eyes burning with fatigue. Some nights, he planned to study but fell asleep with the book open. Some mornings, he woke up early, determined only to be interrupted by work calls. His routine was broken. His sleep cycle collapsed. At first, the disturbance made him panic. But one thing was different. He did not give up. Even on days he studied nothing, he returned the next day. Even when confidence dropped, effort remained. By the end of the first week, he finally completed reviewing the syllabus. It wasn't mastery, but it was progress. And for the first time, William felt William felt something unexpected. Not confidence, but hope. Chapter 2, Fighting Time, Age, and Doubt. The second week began with exhaustion. William woke up before sunrise, not because he was energetic, but because his mind refused to rest. His body felt heavy, his eyes dry, and his head slightly aching. He sat on the edge of the bed for a few minutes, trying to gather himself. At 49, the body does not recover the way it once did. One night of disturbed sleep shows its effect immediately. Yet he stood up. That small action, standing up despite tiredness, was becoming his first victory of the day. He washed his face, opened his laptop quietly, and sat at the same dining table where he had read the suspension email. The table had changed its purpose. It was no longer just a place for meals. It had become his study desk, his battleground, his silent companion in this fight against time. The online videos loaded slowly. William watched the instructor speak confidently, explaining concepts that sounded simple to others but complex to him. He paused the video again and again, rewound sections, took notes in a rough notebook with handwriting that looked older than it once did. "This used to be easy," he muttered. But the truth was painful. It had never been easy. He had simply been younger. At work, the pressure increased. Duties did not slow down because of the exam. Files still needed signatures. Deadlines remained strict. Supervisors expected the same performance as before. No one asked if he had slept well or studied enough. During lunch breaks, he saw his colleagues discussing topics, comparing coaching notes, sharing strategies. Some looked confident. Some looked stressed. A few even joked about failing. William mostly stayed quiet. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he was carrying too much inside. Every spare moment became a calculation. Should I revise this topic or rest my eyes? Should I sleep now or study for one more hour? Am I falling behind? Time, once neutral, had turned into his enemy. Evenings were the hardest. By the time William returned home, his energy was nearly gone. His children talked excitedly about their school day. His wife asked him how work was. He answered with short smiles, trying not to let his anxiety show. After dinner, when the house became quiet, his second day began. Sometimes he studied late into the night, his mind struggling to stay focused. Sometimes he stared at the screen without understanding a single sentence. On those nights, frustration wrapped around him tightly. Once, close to midnight, he closed the laptop suddenly. "I can't do this," he said aloud. The room was silent, but his words felt loud. For a few minutes, he sat there, breathing heavily. Panic crept in, tight chest, racing thoughts, fear of failure. But then something inside him responded, not loudly, but firmly. "You don't have to do everything today. You just have to do something." So he opened the notebook again, even if it was only for 20 minutes. There were days when he did not study at all. Those days hurt the most. Work emergencies, family responsibilities, unexpected fatigue. Life did not pause for his exam. On those days, guilt followed him everywhere. He felt like he was losing control, slipping backward. At night, he replayed the day in his mind, criticizing himself. "You wasted time. You're too slow. You should have started earlier." But something surprising happened during those moments. Instead of quitting, William learned to forgive himself. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough to continue. 2 weeks into preparation, something began to change. Not in his marks. Not in his speed. In his mind. The panic that once attacked him at random moments started to fade. His thoughts became more organized. He stopped comparing himself to others. He stopped counting how many days he had lost. Instead, he began to focus on what was in front of him. One topic. One video. One page. His routine was still. His routine was still irregular, some days early morning study, some nights at midnight, but it was no longer chaotic. It was intentional. William realized something important. Discipline does not mean perfection. It means return. Return after failure. Return after fatigue. Return after doubt. One morning, while revising notes before work, William noticed something strange. He understood the topic. Not just memorized it, understood it. The realization stopped him for a moment. He smiled quietly, almost in disbelief. I'm still capable, he thought. That single thought carried power. It did not make him fearless, but it gave him balance. At 49, William was no longer chasing speed or superiority. He was chasing stability, growth, self-respect. He was no longer studying just to pass an exam. He was proving something to himself. By the end of the second week, William was no longer the same man who had opened that email in fear. He was tired. He was imperfect. He was still uncertain. But he was also stronger. Inside him, a new mindset was forming slowly, quietly, permanently. And that mindset was beginning to change everything. Chapter 3: The Shift. The third week did not begin with motivation. It began with silence. William sat at his study table early in the morning, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. Outside, the world was slowly waking up. Inside him, something was settling like dust after a storm. He was no longer afraid of opening his books. That itself felt strange. In the first days, every study session had started with resistance. His mind fought back. His body complained. Doubt questioned every step. But now, the resistance had softened. It had not disappeared, but it no longer controlled him. William opened his notebook and looked at the pages filled over the last 2 weeks. The handwriting was uneven. Some notes were messy, some incomplete. But every page was proof of effort. He realized something quietly. I am no longer trying. I am doing. His routine still made no sense to anyone else. Some nights, he studied at midnight when the world was asleep. Some mornings, he woke before dawn and revised with tired eyes. Some days, he could not study at all. But the panic was gone. Earlier, missing a study session felt like failure. Now, it felt like delay. There was a difference. Failure breaks you. Delay only asks for patience. This shift in thinking changed everything. At work, something else changed too. William walked differently. He spoke less, but with more clarity. He no longer joined anxious discussions about the exam. When others complained, he listened but did not absorb their fear. One colleague asked him, "How is your preparation going?" William paused for a second and replied honestly, slow, but steady. He surprised himself. Those words were true. There were still hard days. One evening, after a long duty shift, William opened a practice test online. The questions looked difficult. He answered slowly, carefully. When the result appeared, it was not good. For a moment, the old fear tried to return. What if effort is not enough? What if age really has defeated me? William closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then he did something new. He reviewed his mistakes without anger, not blaming himself, not insulting his intelligence, just learning. This was new. This was growth. Sleep became optional, not because he wanted to suffer, but because time demanded sacrifice. Some nights, he slept 4 hours. Some nights, less. His body protested. His eyes burned. But something strange happened again. His mind became calm. Even in exhaustion, he felt purpose. Earlier in life, he had worked hard because he had to. Now, he was working hard because he chose to. That choice made the struggle meaningful. 2 weeks into consistent study, William noticed changes that had nothing to do with the exam. He became more patient at home, more focused at work, less reactive to stress. His children noticed it. "You don't get angry like before," his son said one evening. William smiled. He hadn't realized it, but discipline was shaping more than his study habits. It was reshaping his character. One night, while revising late, William paused and reflected. What changed? He wondered. The syllabus was still difficult. Time was still limited. Age had not reduced. But fear had lost its power. He understood now that confidence does not come before action. It comes from action. Each small session. Each tired morning. Each decision to continue. These moments had built a new identity. He was no longer a 49-year-old man afraid of exams. He was a man who shows up, regardless of age. William thought about others his age. Many had started preparation. Many had quit quietly. Some blamed the system. Some blamed age. He did not judge them. But he understood something deeply. Most people don't fail because they can't do it. They fail because they stop becoming. William had chosen not to stop. That night, he wrote a sentence at the top of his notebook. I am not preparing to pass. I am preparing to become. He underlined it twice. That sentence was not for motivation. It was a reminder. By the end of the 3rd week, William felt like a new person, not louder, not stronger in appearance, but stronger inside. The exam was still ahead. But fear was behind him. Chapter 4, More Than an Exam. The final week arrived quietly. There was no dramatic countdown, no sudden rush of confidence, no magical feeling of readiness. William simply continued what he had been doing, waking, working, studying, resting when possible, and repeating. The exam was close now. Strangely, that fact no longer controlled him. He still felt pressure, yes, but it was no longer fear. It was responsibility. A calm, heavy awareness that this moment mattered, not just for his job, but for what it represented. William had already crossed the hardest part. On the morning of the exam, William woke up before the alarm. He sat on the edge of his bed, breathing slowly. His body felt tired, but his mind was clear. He did not revise frantically. He did not panic. He simply reviewed a few key notes and closed the book. His wife looked at him and said, "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you." Those words stayed with him. At the exam center, William saw faces of many men his age. Some looked confident. Some looked broken. Some avoided eye contact, as if ashamed to be there at 40 or 50. William did not feel shame. He felt dignity. He had shown up. When he sat down to write the exam, his hands trembled slightly. He smiled at that. It reminded him that he was human. The questions were not easy. Some he knew. Some he partially understood. Some he did not know at all. But he did not freeze. He answered what he could. He skipped what he couldn't. He returned when possible. There was no panic. Only effort. When it was over, William walked out slowly. He did not rush to discuss answers. He did not calculate marks. He simply stood outside for a moment, feeling the air on his face. For the first time in weeks, he felt light. Whether he passed or failed, something important had already happened. He had reclaimed himself. Days later, when the result came, William read it alone. He had qualified. But that word, qualified, felt small compared to what he had gained. He returned home quietly. No celebration. No announcement. That evening, he sat with his children and told them the story not of success, but of struggle. He told them about fear, about doubt, about starting late, about not giving up. Remember this, he said, life doesn't end when things become difficult. That's when it asks who you are. William returned to work with a new presence. Not louder, not proud, just steady. People noticed. Some asked him how he managed. He answered simply, I didn't wait to feel ready. I started. That was his message to his generation. Age is not the enemy. Comfort is. At 49, William did not become extraordinary. He became intentional. And that changed everything.